You probably don't think of Revenant as one of Apex's most influential legends, but I'm going to convince you that he is. Now just hear me out real quick and give me 8 to 10 minutes to explain why. Revenant was Apex's first example of Respawn essentially giving up on a legend's original design and starting over. Most of his abilities were completely replaced in Season 18, and while that was a massive change at the time, I think its impact goes much further than Revenant himself. His rework helped redefine how Respawn approached legend balancing and paved the way for larger reworks that have become increasingly more common in Apex. So let's dive in and start with talking about the old Revenant and how we even got here in the first place.
You all think you'll make it out of this alive?
Revenant was released in Season 4, which began in early February 2020, so he's low-key an OG character at this point and has been in the game for a long time. He was super hyped up upon his release because his abilities were pretty strong on paper, but in reality, Revenant was just mid. His silence tactical was pretty cool, but you only had one of them with like a 20-second cooldown. And then for the Death Totem ultimate, it was cool, but ended up being pretty gimmicky. Having a second chance at life seems broken, but when you went into a fight with only health and then respawn with like 1 HP at the totem, it made it severely underwhelming. I'd argue Revenant on release was one of the most underpowered characters in Apex's history. You can fight me on that in the comments, but I'll stand by it. Now, it wasn't all bad for old Revenant. Despite being lackluster for most of his time, he did have his moment in the sun. He received some buffs over the next few seasons, like getting 2 silence tacticals and having more health upon respawning at the Death Totem, and allowing more climbing with his passive. This ultimately created some meta viability for Revenant, most notably around seasons 8 and 9 with the Rev-Tane combo. This was a pretty simple but effective strategy. You would place your Revenant totem with an Octane jump pad, use the totem and take the pad, go crazy in fights, respawn back at the totem, and then jump right back in. This was basically the early version of axle queuing into a fight with a full squad and then annihilating them, but you could do it twice. This became incredibly toxic, incredibly fast, so Respawn introduced some Death Totem nerfs in Season 10, and then it was all downhill from here. So basically, the old Revenant was good for about 2 seasons, and it became apparent that his kit, especially his ultimate, was just incredibly flawed from a game design perspective, and he just kind of dwelled in the Apex meta basement for a while. And this is where things get weird, because Respawn basically just decided to turn Revenant into a completely new character. The Death Totem couldn't really ever be balanced properly, and the silence was just kinda okay, so they just casually got rid of them completely. In Season 18, we got Revenant Reborn, and calling it a rework doesn't feel like it does this change justice. It was basically a complete overhaul. We got a new tactical called Shadow Pounce, which is basically a big jump that can be charged up to go further, and his new ultimate, Forged Shadows, which gives Revenant a temporary shield that also has the ability to regenerate. One thing that was kept though was his passive, allowing him to climb taller walls and have better movement while crouching. And I like that this was kept. It's pretty cool. I also kinda wish they kept the silence tactical, because it was really cool, but oh well, rest in peace. And of course, Revenant got a completely new model as well. Can't forget about that. So, what did these changes do? They made Revenant good for the first time in a long time, and it wasn't a broken or toxic level of good. It was good in a relatively healthy way, and honestly a breath of fresh air, I would argue. Revenant's playstyle completely changed, where before he was more of a team-oriented legend because of his totem, but his new abilities made him a more solo-oriented character. This made him a solid pick for solo queuing and ranked without knowing who your teammates were going to pick, and made him really good for just fragging in pubs. Since the rework, he has received a few balance changes and even got some buffs around Season 26 that brought his pick rate above 10%. Things have kind of flatlined at this point though, no pun intended, and Revenant remains a okay legend for the most part. I'd say right around B tier as a whole, while being A tier for pubs and wildcard. So let's go back to the original point of this video. This rework introducing Revenant Reborn opened up a wide array of possibilities for Apex and its balancing. This overhaul showed Respawn that they didn't have to keep trying to balance a legend around abilities that they originally released with. If abilities weren't working on a fundamental level, then they could just replace them. We've seen Respawn become way more willing to make major changes to existing legends in more recent times. Lifeline is probably one of the best examples, as she got a huge rework in Season 23. She got a new passive with the ability to glide from her dock drone, and that of course is on top of her revive passive remaining. She could also attach the dock drone to a teammate to heal and follow the teammate. and her ult is now a 360-degree halo ring that blocks projectiles from the side and increases heal and revive speeds. Of course, most recently, we got Bloodhound with a completely new ultimate, the Allfather's Cloak, that replaced Beast of the Hunt. I made a video about Bloodhound recently, so you can check that out after this one. It'll be linked at the end. And then we've also had some smaller but still prominent reworks, like Ashe getting her dash passive, which was incredibly broken upon release, and Fuse also having his ultimate reworked to where it can now breach through walls. None of these reworks have gone quite as far as Revenant Reborn. Respawn hasn't completely replaced almost an entire kit again, but I think Revenant opened the door for this kind of balancing philosophy to exist in the first place. This has also become a core philosophy in how Apex seasons are structured now. For a long time, one of the biggest selling points of a new season was getting a completely new legend. Now, while we still do get new legends, like Axel, who we got not too long ago, Respawn has become much more comfortable letting major reworks to existing legends become some of the biggest pieces of seasonal content instead. Rather than endlessly adding characters to the game, they can go back to legends that have fallen behind, rethink what can make them interesting, and in some cases give them entirely new ways to play. That's why I think Revenant is way more important to the history of Apex Legends than people give him credit for. It's not because he dominated the game for years, because that's far from the case. Let's be real here. It's because Revenant was arguably the first legend where Respawn had to admit that traditional balancing just wasn't enough. They spent multiple years trying to make the original version of his character work, and eventually the solution wasn't another buff or nerf. The solution was accepting that the original design itself was the problem. And once Respawn was willing to cross that line, there was really no reason that they couldn't do it again. So yeah, Revenant might not be the first legend that you think of when talking about characters that changed Apex Legends. You probably think of characters like Seer, Horizon, or Valkyrie, for example. But when it comes to how Respawn approaches balancing the game today, I think Revenant's rework might quietly be one of the most influential changes they've ever made. And even though part of me will always miss throwing silences at people and placing down that dumbass broken death totem, I think Apex is probably better off with them not existing. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new. Be sure to watch this Bloodhound video on screen. As I said earlier, I'm sure you'll enjoy it just as much as this one. I'll see y'all in the next video.